The rain came in slow, deliberate sheets that night, the kind that muted the world, blurring streetlights into ghosts and turning every window into a mirror. Inside the small two-story house at the edge of Crestwood, Elena Ward stood by the kitchen sink, her fingers gripping the counter until her knuckles turned white. Behind her, the clock ticked steadily toward 8:46 p.m., each second slicing through the thick silence between her and her husband. "Are you even listening to me, Daniel?" she said softly, not turning around. Her reflection in the dark window showed only her outline, small, tired, fading. Daniel leaned against the doorway, jaw tight. "I heard you," he muttered. "You're saying you're not happy. You've been saying that for months." Elena turned to face him. Her eyes, once warm, had gone flat, like still water hiding something underneath. "I'm saying I don't feel safe anymore." That word, safe, hung in the air like smoke. Daniel's lips pressed into a line. "You make it sound like I'm some kind of monster." "You don't have to shout to be cruel," she whispered. He didn't reply. Only the sound of rain filled the space between them. Later, Daniel would tell the police that Elena left around 9. Said she needed air. Said she often walked the neighborhood when she was upset. He'd make it sound ordinary, harmless, a simple walk on a stormy night. But the truth was anything but ordinary. At 9:17 p.m., a neighbor's security camera caught Elena stepping off her porch, umbrella in hand. She looked back once, her face pale in the faint glow of the porch light, and then walked down the street. The camera's timestamp froze her there, mid-step, the rain bending around her like a curtain. She was never seen again. Daniel's 911 call came at 10:42 p.m. His voice was controlled, almost rehearsed. "My wife's gone. She said she was going for a walk and she hasn't come back. It's been over an hour." The dispatcher asked for details, what she was wearing, whether she'd taken her phone, if she'd done this before. Daniel hesitated on each question, as if the answers were slipping through his fingers. She left her phone here," he said finally. "She does that sometimes." But she didn't. Elena never went anywhere without her phone. By midnight, 2 patrol cars pulled up outside the Ward residence. Blue and red lights flashed against the rain-soaked walls, painting the house in the colors of crisis. Officer Raymond Holt, the first responder, noted Daniel's composure. Not hysterical, not calm either, but something in between. "When did you last see her?" Holt asked. "About 9, Daniel said. "We argued I shouldn't have let her go out like that." "Argued about what?" Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "Nothing serious. Just marriage stuff." The officer's eyes flicked toward the living room, a wine glass on its side, a cracked picture frame on the floor, a chair turned slightly, just enough to look wrong. "Mind if we look around?" Holt asked. "Of course not," Daniel said quickly. "I want her found." The search began small, just the surrounding streets and nearby woods. Volunteers joined the next morning, combing through mud and overgrown trails. Posters went up. Local news ran the story. Crestwood woman missing after stormy night. But the house, that house, was where the real storm brewed. As the hours turned to days, Daniel's grief played out in ways that didn't sit right with those who watched him. He cried on cue for the cameras, thanked the volunteers, offered interviews. But neighbors noticed things. How quickly he'd cleaned the porch. How he never joined the searches himself. How he flinched when someone mentioned Elena's name. Grace Holloway, the woman across the street, would later tell police. He looked more like a man waiting for bad news he already knew. Inside, Daniel replayed that night again and again. The argument, her leaving, the sound of the door slamming. But there was something else, too. A noise he couldn't quite forget. Something that had echoed faintly from downstairs long after she was gone. A dull thud. Then silence. He'd told himself it was nothing, just the storm, the house shifting, the wind. But even as he repeated the lie, his mind kept circling back to the stairs. The next evening, Detective Mara Linton was assigned the case. She'd seen enough disappearances to know when a story didn't fit right. When she arrived, Daniel greeted her at the door, eyes red but steady. "I've already told the officers everything," he said, voice trembling just enough. "I know," Mara replied, "but I'd like to hear it from you, again." As she walked through the house, she noticed the faint scent of bleach in the air. The carpet near the kitchen looked slightly newer than the rest, cut and replaced. She said nothing. Not yet. "You said she took nothing with her?" "Just an umbrella. No phone, no purse. She wasn't planning to be gone long." Mara's eyes drifted to a family photo on the wall. Daniel's arm was around Elena, both smiling, but something about her posture struck her, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You two had been together how long? 7 years. And in that time, had she ever disappeared before? No, never. The word fell heavy, final. Outside, rain began again, softer this time, like a whisper against the roof. Mara closed her notebook and glanced once more toward the staircase. The faint outline of a recently moved rug lingered near its base. "We'll be in touch, Mr. Ward," she said. Daniel nodded, his eyes following her as she left. When the door shut behind her, he exhaled, long and shaky. His gaze drifted toward the stairs, the shadow beneath them yawning open like a secret. He turned away, poured himself a drink, and didn't notice the single droplet of water trailing down the wall, tracing a path to the floor, a stain darkening the corner where the baseboard met the first step. Outside, Mara sat in her car, jotting one final note before driving off. Husband cooperative. Emotional. Story feels too clean. She looked back at the house one last time, its lights flickering behind rain-slick glass. Something in her gut twisted, the kind of instinct that comes from years of chasing ghosts. "Don't trust the quiet ones," she murmured to herself. The windshield wipers swept once more, clearing her view. The house stood still, but somewhere deep inside it, behind wood and drywall and silence, Elena Ward was still there. And by the time they finally looked under those stairs, Crestwood would never sleep the same again. Detective Mara Linton had been with Crestwood PD for 12 years, long enough to know that disappearances were rarely clean. The ones that began with quiet rain and calm voices, those were the ones that ended worst. She returned to the Ward's house 2 days after Elena vanished. The storm had passed, but the air still smelled like wet earth and unease. Daniel opened the door wearing the same gray hoodie he'd worn before. His eyes were bloodshot, but his expression carefully measured. "Detective," he greeted, stepping aside. "Any news?" "That's what I'm here to find out," Mara said evenly, brushing the damp from her coat. The house looked lived in but frozen in time, as if no one had dared touch anything since that night. 2 empty coffee mugs on the counter, an umbrella dripping faintly in the sink. And near the living room, the same rug Mara had noticed before, still slightly misaligned, hiding the edge of new carpet. Her notebook remained closed. She preferred to start with silence. People filled silence with truth, or with lies. Daniel spoke first. "I've barely slept. Every time the phone rings, I think it's her." "You mentioned she's never done this before," Mara said softly. "Never. Elena wasn't impulsive." "And you argued the night she disappeared?" "A small fight. Nothing big." "About?" Daniel looked away. "She wanted to visit her sister. I didn't think it was a good idea. They don't get along. They don't get..." Mara watched him closely. The pause between visit her sister and I didn't think it was a good idea was a little too long. A pause people used when revising the truth mid-sentence. "What time did she leave?" "Around 9. And you called 911 at 10:40 something. You waited nearly 2 hours? I thought she'd cool off and come home." Mara nodded slowly. "Mind if I look around again?" "Of course, go ahead." Her boots clicked softly against the hardwood. She moved through the rooms, noting what felt off. A half-folded blanket, the faint outline of furniture recently shifted, the lemony tang of bleach in the air. In the bedroom, the bed was neatly made, but the nightstand drawer wouldn't close fully. Inside, she found a single earring, a broken chain, and a folded receipt from a local hardware store dated 3 days before the disappearance. It listed bleach, gloves, and duct tape. Mara stared at it for a long moment. Then she folded it back exactly as she found it. She drove to the hardware store that afternoon. The cashier remembered Daniel immediately. Yeah, tall guy, dark hair, seemed jumpy, said he was cleaning mold in the basement. Did he mention where? No, but he paid cash. Big jug of bleach, though. Industrial size. Mara thanked him and returned to the precinct, her gut twisting tighter. Mold. Always mold. That was the favorite story of guilty men. Back at her desk, she played Elena's missing persons report again, Daniel's 911 call. She said she needed space. She's never done this before. Please, you have to find her. The tone was desperate, yes, but not panicked. Mara had heard real panic before. It came in broken gasps, not clean sentences. She pressed pause, leaned back, and whispered to herself, "In my line of work, guilt doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers through the details." That night, she read through Elena's social media posts. Pictures of flowers, sunsets, a few selfies. Nothing alarming, until the captions began changing tone 3 months earlier. Some cages look like homes. When love turns to silence, even breathing feels loud. No photos of Daniel after that. No tagged posts. Just empty smiles. Mara rubbed her temples. She was fading long before she vanished. Flashback. 6 months earlier, Elena sat at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone. Daniel walked in, towel around his neck, hair damp from a shower. "Who's Aaron?" he asked, voice deceptively casual. "He's from work." "You text him a lot." "We're on the same project." He leaned closer, eyes sharp. "You don't have to lie." "I'm not." The sound of his palm striking the table made her flinch. The cup in her hand rattled, spilling coffee across her phone. Daniel exhaled, forcing a smile. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean... You know how much I love you, right?" Elena nodded, but her eyes stayed fixed on the wet screen. Inside, something small and vital began to die. Present-day Mara returned to the house again, this time with Officer Holt. Daniel watched from the doorway, his patience visibly thinning. "This is harassment," he snapped. "You've been through this house 3 times." "We're being thorough," Mara said calmly. "Standard procedure." As Holt checked the back rooms, Mara moved toward the kitchen. She opened drawers one by one, scanning through clutter, cutlery, batteries, rubber bands, until something metallic caught her eye. A phone, wrapped in a plastic sandwich bag, screen dark. She turned it over. Elena Ward. Mara's pulse quickened. "Holt?" she called quietly. Daniel's voice came from behind her. "What are you doing?" "Finding things that shouldn't be here," she replied, lifting the phone into the light. He froze. That must be an old one. She got a new phone last year." "Funny," Mara said. "Same model listed in her report. Same pink case her sister mentioned." "I didn't even know it was there." Mara said nothing. She tapped the power button. Nothing. Dead. But even off, the phone was a story waiting to be told. "We'll take this for analysis," she said. "I want a lawyer," Daniel muttered. "You're not under arrest, Mr. Ward," Mara said gently. "Not yet." Back at the precinct, the evidence team logged the phone. The battery had been deliberately drained, SIM card intact. Mara leaned over the technician's shoulder as the data was extracted. Call logs, messages, photos. The last outgoing text from Elena's number had been sent at 9:04 p.m. the night she disappeared. It read, "We need to talk, I can't keep pretending." The message had been sent to a contact labeled simply A. There were no replies, not even a delivery receipt. Mara's eyes narrowed. "A," she whispered. "Who the hell are you?" By morning, news of the found phone spread fast. Reporters camped outside Daniel's house, cameras flashing as he shouted for them to leave. Grace Holloway watched from across the street, clutching her robe tighter. They found her phone, she whispered to herself. But not her. Inside, Daniel sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty spot where the phone had been found. His reflection in the window looked fractured, ghostly. He pressed his palms to his face. "She was supposed to come back," he muttered, voice cracking. "She was supposed to forgive me." His words hung in the air, unanswered, drowned out by the hum of the refrigerator, the only sound left in a house filled with silence. Later that day, Mara stood at the base of the staircase, looking at the faint patch of new carpet again. She crouched, running her fingers along the seam. The fibers were shorter, the glue still faintly tacky. "Something's off," she murmured. Officer Holt frowned. "You thinking we missed something?" "I'm thinking we're looking in the wrong places," she said. "He's smart, but not smart enough." Her gaze lingered on the stairs a moment longer. There was a strange stillness beneath them, a quiet that felt too deliberate. Mara stood, pocketing her notebook. "We'll come back with a warrant. I want a deeper search. Especially down there." She nodded toward the staircase, its shadows stretching across the polished floor like open arms. As she walked out, the rain began again, soft, rhythmic, relentless. And beneath the stairs, something waited in silence, untouched and unseen. Detective Mara Linton parked across from the Ward residence just after dawn. The neighborhood looked different in daylight, ordinary, almost peaceful. The rain had finally stopped, and the morning light shimmered against puddles lining the cracked pavement. But beneath that calm, Crestwood felt like a place holding its breath. She sipped lukewarm coffee from a paper cup and glanced at her notes. The missing wife, the spotless husband, the found phone. Every piece pointed toward something calculated, rehearsed. Yet there was one detail that wouldn't leave her mind. The neighbors. Someone had to have seen or heard something that night. Her eyes lifted to the small house across the street. White paint peeling at the corners. Curtains half drawn. A figure stood there watching her. The same woman who'd been at the window the night Mara first visited the Wards. Mara set her cup down and crossed the street. Grace Holloway opened the door before Mara could knock. She was in her late 40s, with graying hair pulled into a loose bun and eyes that seemed permanently shadowed by lack of sleep. "You're the detective," she said quietly. "That's right. Detective Linton. Do you mind if I come in for a few minutes?" Grace hesitated, then stepped aside. "I suppose someone needs to talk about it." The interior smelled faintly of lavender and stale tea. Stacks of newspapers filled one corner of the living room. The TV was muted, replaying footage of Elena's disappearance. The missing woman's smile on the screen looked hauntingly out of place. Mara took a seat. "You knew Elena?" Grace nodded, clutching a mug with both hands. "We weren't close, but we talked. You know how it is. Borrowed sugar, shared recipes, that sort of thing. I liked her. She had this quiet way about her. Like she was always thinking 2 steps ahead of what she was allowed to say. When was the last time you saw her?" "The night she disappeared." Grace's voice lowered. "I heard them fighting again." Mara leaned in slightly. "Again?" Grace stared at the untouched tea. "It started months ago. At first it was muffled. Voices through the walls, that's all. Then it got worse. I heard her crying some nights. Once she came over the next morning with makeup covering a bruise near her temple. Said she'd slipped in the shower." Mara's pen froze mid-note. "Did she ever say she was afraid of him?" "Not directly," Grace said. "Elena was too careful for that. But she said something once that stuck with me." "What was that?" "She said some people hurt you without meaning to. Others make it look like love." The words hung between them, heavy and electric. Mara stood by the window looking across at the Ward house. The curtains were drawn tight, like eyelids refusing to open. "Did you see anyone else there recently?" she asked. "Visitors?" Grace hesitated. Her grip on the mug tightened. "Yes, there was a man. Not her husband." Mara turned sharply. "You're sure?" "Positive, tall, dark hair. He came by in the afternoon sometimes when Daniel's car wasn't in the driveway. I saw them talking in the backyard once. She looked alive when she was with him, smiling, nervous too. I didn't think much of it then. But now, she trailed off. Did you recognize him? Grace shook her head. Never saw him up close. But one time, she came over after he left. She said she'd done something stupid, that she had a secret, one that could ruin everything. Those were her words. Did she say what the secret was? No, Grace said softly. Just that she wasn't ready to tell anyone yet. Mara noted every word carefully. Her pulse picked up as a theory began to form. A triangle, perhaps. Jealousy. Betrayal. A spark that had turned deadly. Did you hear anything unusual the night she vanished? Grace swallowed hard. Her eyes flicked to the ceiling as if replaying the memory. I heard yelling around 9. That was normal by then. But later, close to 10, I heard something else. A dragging sound, heavy, across the floor. From which direction? From their living room. Then, silence. Mara felt a chill move through her. And you didn't call the police? I almost did, Grace said, tears welling. But then I saw the porch light go off. I thought maybe they'd made up. I didn't want to interfere. People always said Daniel was a good man. Polite. Charming. Mara closed her notebook. Sometimes charm is a mask, Mrs. Holloway. Rain hammered softly against the windows of the Ward residence as Detective Mara Linton crouched near the living room floorboards. The air felt heavy with silence, the kind that settles after too many lies. Her gloved fingers brushed against a loose plank beneath the edge of a worn rug. The same rug that had seemed slightly misplaced since the first walkthrough. A careful tug revealed a narrow compartment, no bigger than a shoebox. Inside lay a small leather-bound journal, edges frayed, the initials EW faintly etched in gold. Mara's pulse quickened. She had seen desperate things people hide. Letters, money, sometimes keys to a life they were too afraid to live. But this felt different. She flipped it open. On the first page, in slanted handwriting, was a date. March 12th. He's watching me again. The entries were raw, trembling with fear and longing. Daniel says he loves me, but I can't breathe here anymore. The basement scares me, the smell, the sound at night. Aaron says he'll protect me, but he's part of the reason I'm afraid. The truth is under the stairs. Mara reread that last line, under the stairs. It pulsed in her mind like a heartbeat, the words of a woman who knew her time was running out. She closed the journal gently, the leather cold in her hands. Behind her, the faint hum of the house seemed to deepen, the refrigerator buzzing, a floorboard creaking above. Even empty, this home felt inhabited by the memory of violence. At the precinct, Mara sat across from Daniel Ward once again. His eyes were bloodshot, but his demeanor had shifted. The earlier panic now hardened into something else. Defensiveness. Calculation. Did Elena ever talk about your brother Aaron? Mara asked, her tone calm but piercing. Daniel's jaw tightened. Aaron? Why would she? You tell me, she said, sliding the journal across the table. Because your wife wrote about him, one in detail. For a flicker of a second, his composure fractured. His eyes darted toward the journal, then back to her. You went through her things without a warrant? We had a warrant, Mara replied coolly. We found it under the floorboards, right where the carpet was missing. He leaned back in his chair, forcing a hollow laugh. Elena was unstable. She made things up. She had this fantasy that the world was against her. Funny, Mara said, lowering her voice. Because the blood in your basement doesn't seem imaginary. That broke him. His gaze sharpened, the mask gone. You think you know what happened, he hissed, but you don't know her. That night, Mara couldn't sleep. She sat at her desk, rereading Elena's journal by the glow of a desk lamp. The entries painted a woman cornered by guilt and fear, torn between two men, one controlling, one forbidden. Aaron, Daniel's estranged brother had left town years ago after a bitter business fallout. But the journal hinted he'd returned quietly, secretly rekindling something dangerous with Elena. When I see Aaron, I remember what it's like to be wanted, not owned. But if Daniel ever finds out, he'll destroy us both. The words carried the scent of tragedy. Mara flipped to the final entry, dated 2 nights before Elena's disappearance. I'm going to tell Daniel everything. I can't live like this. If something happens to me, it started in the basement. The basement again. Always the basement. The following morning, Mara brought in a forensic team. The air was damp and metallic as they descended the narrow stairs beneath the house. The walls were lined with tools, paint cans, and boxes of old photo albums. It smelled of mildew and rust. Over here, one of the techs called. Near the base of the staircase, faint reddish smears traced the wooden edge, almost invisible without the UV light. A few drops had soaked into the grain of the floor, too small to be seen before. Blood, the tech confirmed quietly. Not much, but enough. Mara exhaled slowly. Send it to the lab. Rush it. Her eyes wandered to the steps themselves, solid, ordinary at first glance. But when she knelt and ran her hand along the base, she felt it. A hollow echo beneath the boards. Something was off. She tapped lightly. The sound wasn't right. That evening, back at her office, Mara reviewed Daniel's financial records. Bank withdrawals, transfers, purchases. Something caught her attention. A charge from a local hardware store, dated 3 days before Elena's disappearance. Items: bleach, duct tape, and nails. Her phone buzzed. A text from Grace Holloway, the neighbor. Detective Linton, I remembered something. The night Elena vanished, I saw Daniel carrying something large to the basement. I thought it was furniture, but it was wrapped in a tarp. Mara's stomach turned. Thank you, Grace, she typed back. Stay home. I'll be in touch. She set the phone down, her mind racing. Each piece of evidence in the journal, the blood, the missing carpet, painted a story that Daniel desperately wanted to erase. But something still didn't fit. Aaron's name lingered like a ghost. Where was he? And what did he know?
When Mara finally tracked down Aaron Ward, he was living in a run-down motel on the outskirts of town, his eyes hollow, his hands trembling as he lit a cigarette. I didn't kill her, he said before she even asked. I loved her, then why hide? Mara asked. He took a long drag, staring at the smoke curling upward, because Daniel told me to. He said if I came near her again, he'd make sure I disappeared too. What happened that night? She pressed. Aaron's voice cracked. She called me, said she couldn't take it anymore, said she had to tell him the truth. I told her to wait until morning, but she was done waiting. He looked at Mara with haunted eyes. I never saw her again. Mara's phone buzzed again. The lab report. She opened it silently. The blood sample from the basement matched Elena Ward. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Elena's blood was found under the stairs, she said softly. Aaron froze. Under the stairs. Mara nodded slowly, the words echoing from the journal. The truth is under the stairs. As she walked out into the night, rain falling in thin, cold sheets, Mara felt the story twisting into darker territory, one that was no longer just about jealousy or betrayal. It was about something buried deeper, something Daniel had fought desperately to keep hidden. Gives to be continued in Chapter 5, The Discovery Beneath the Stairs.
The rain hadn't stopped in 3 days. It came in thin, unbroken sheets, washing the color from Crestwood until the whole town seemed steeped in gray. Detective Mara Linton stood outside the Ward residence once more, collar turned up against the storm, watching as the forensic vans rolled to a stop. Red and blue lights bled across the puddles, flashing rhythmically, the pulse of a house that refused to stay silent. She'd been here too many times to count, but tonight felt different. The air buzzed with something electric, not just the storm, but the sense that everything was about to break open. Cadaver dogs caught a scent, the lead tech said, stepping beside her. Rain clung to his jacket, dripping from his gloves. Basement again, near the staircase this time. Mara nodded slowly, her stomach tightening. Let's do it. The house was cold and hollow inside, as if it had been waiting for them. The walls groaned under the weight of wind and memory. They descended into the basement, boots thudding softly against the concrete floor. The air grew damp, metallic, tinged with something sour. The dogs whined near the base of the staircase, scratching at the lower paneling. The tech ran a hand along the wood. There's something here, he muttered. Mara crouched, flashlight cutting across the wall's edge. Faint tool marks, a different shade of paint. Someone had sealed this. Start removing it, she ordered quietly. The first strike of the crowbar echoed through the basement, a sharp hollow sound that sent a shiver up her spine. The second blow loosened a plank. The third revealed a layer of coarse concrete underneath. It wasn't supposed to be there. Get the chisels, Mara said. Her voice was steady, but her pulse was not. As they chipped away, dust filled the air, a suffocating mix of rot and lime. Then came the smell. Heavy, sweet, undeniable. The kind that clings to your throat and never leaves. The tech froze, eyes meeting hers. We found her. The concrete gave way piece by piece until the cavity inside was revealed. Shallow, narrow, built just deep enough to hide what no one was meant to find. Wrapped in a dirty, blood-stained carpet, the same one that had once covered the living room floor, lay the remains of Elena Ward. Her hair, matted and darkened by time, framed what little was left of her face. Her wedding ring still clung to her finger. The room fell silent except for the rain hammering above. Mara stepped forward, every breath trembling. Photograph everything, then seal the area. I want DNA, fibers, fingerprints, and the works. She turned away, closing her eyes for a brief moment. The image of Elena's last journal entry flickered behind them. If something happens to me, it started in the basement. Now she knew it ended there too. At the precinct, Daniel Ward sat in the interrogation room, hands cuffed, a sheen of sweat glistening on his forehead. His once carefully groomed hair hung limp and wet, his shirt clinging to him from the rain. He looked up when Mara entered. What now? He muttered. You already think I killed her. Mara sat down across from him, placing a single photograph on the table, the one taken just hours ago of Elena's remains under the stairs. No, Daniel, she said softly. I don't think. I know. His face went pale. His jaw flexed once, twice. That's not her, he said hoarsely, eyes darting away. It can't be. We matched the ring, Mara replied. We found traces of her blood under the basement stairs, and we found her journal. She was afraid of you. His lips trembled, his voice barely a whisper. I loved her. Then why is she dead? He stared at the photograph. His fingers twitched, the metal cuffs rattling softly. She said she was leaving, he murmured. That she didn't love me anymore. That she was going to him. Aaron, Mara said. He flinched at the name. She was mine, he hissed suddenly. After everything I gave her, the house, the life, the safety. She was mine, and she wanted to throw it all away for him. Mara leaned forward. What happened that night, Daniel? He swallowed hard. The words began to spill, broken, halting. She told me she'd told him everything, that she was done pretending. I begged her to stay, to talk, to give me another chance. She said no. She said she couldn't breathe in this house anymore. His eyes glistened, his voice shaking now. I grabbed her arm. I didn't mean to. She just kept pulling away. I told her she couldn't leave. I told her I'd change, but she screamed. He pressed his palms against his eyes. She hit her head on the stairs. It was an accident. God, it was an accident. Mara's voice dropped to a whisper. And then what? He looked up slowly, tears tracing his cheeks. She wasn't moving. There was blood. So much blood. I panicked. I wanted to make it stop. I wrapped her in the carpet, carried her downstairs. I thought if I could hide her, maybe it would all go away. Maybe I could fix it. His voice broke completely then, dissolving into a sob. I just wanted her to stay. Mara watched him silently. The storm outside beat against the windows, echoing the chaos inside the room. You buried her under the stairs, she said finally. And then you called 911. He nodded weakly. I thought if I said she went for a walk, they'd look somewhere else. I didn't think they'd find her. When the confession ended, Daniel slumped in his chair, exhausted and empty. Mara gathered the file, her expression unreadable. You'll be charged with murder, she said quietly. Elena deserves that much. As she stood to leave, Daniel looked up, not angry now, just hollow. You think you understand, he said. But you don't. I didn't kill her because I hated her. I did it because I couldn't let her go. Mara paused at the door, her voice steady but distant. That's still murder, Daniel. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the world washed clean but eerily still. She walked toward her car, feeling the weight of the case pressing against her chest. The flashing lights faded behind her, but Elena's words lingered in her mind. The truth is under the stairs. The truth had been found, yes, but not all of it. Because even as Daniel confessed, something about his story still didn't sit right. If Elena had fallen, if it was truly an accident, why had her phone been hidden in the kitchen drawer, turned off? Why had her last message never been sent? As Mara slid into her car, she opened her case folder one last time. There, clipped to the back, was a small envelope, a piece of evidence that had just come in from forensics. Inside was a single photograph recovered from Elena's old camera. It showed Elena and Aaron, taken just days before she vanished. They were smiling, but her eyes looked terrified. Mara stared at it for a long moment. Then she whispered to herself, "There's more to this story." The house at 112 Maple Drive looked different now. New paint, new windows, a sold sign leaning crooked in the front yard, half swallowed by overgrown grass. But no amount of renovation could hide what had happened inside. The foundation still remembered. The wall still whispered. Grace Holloway stood across the street clutching a small paper bag of groceries that had long since gone cold. Movers carried boxes up the walkway, laughing lightly as thunder rolled somewhere far in the distance. They didn't know. They couldn't. Her eyes drifted to the basement window, the one that looked toward the staircase. It had been sealed with fresh concrete, smooth and gray. Clean. But she could still see it in her mind. The flashing lights, the officers, the sight of Elena being carried out on a stretcher, wrapped in plastic and sorrow. Grace hadn't slept well since that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the sound of something dragging across the floorboards again. The sound she'd ignored for too long. Maybe it's better if I just disappear, Elena had once whispered to her from across the fence. Grace used to think it was just a cry for attention. Now she knew it had been a goodbye. Detective Mara Linton stood inside that same house 2 weeks later. The new owners had requested a walkthrough, something about wanting closure before moving in. She hadn't planned to come back, but the case had its hooks in her. The air smelled faintly of bleach and new paint, but the memories cut through. She stood in the doorway, staring down the hall where Daniel Ward had once stood, eyes wide and voice trembling, swearing he didn't know what happened to his wife. Now he was awaiting sentencing in county jail. His confession had sealed his fate. Second-degree murder. But still, something about it gnawed at her. It wasn't the guilt that bothered her most. It was the missing pieces. Daniel had confessed to killing Elena in a moment of rage, but forensics told a slightly different story. Bruises that didn't match his grip, time of death that didn't perfectly align with his version of events. There was also the matter of her phone. Wiped clean, hidden deliberately. Too deliberate for panic. Mara ran her fingers along the freshly painted stairwell wall. The faintest ridge of uneven texture met her touch, the place where the cavity had been sealed. Under her breath, she murmured, "The truth is under the stairs." Across town, Grace sat by her window, a half-empty cup of tea cooling beside her. She had stopped talking to people after the trial. The neighbors had stopped too, out of pity or maybe discomfort. Every night she replayed it. Elena's laughter drifting from the garden, the quiet tears, the strange man who had come when Daniel was away. Aaron Ward. Grace had only seen him twice, but his presence had left a mark. A kind of shadow that clung to the edges of her memory. Mara had questioned him, yes. But after Daniel's confession, Aaron was released. There wasn't enough evidence to tie him directly to the crime. Still, Grace couldn't shake the feeling that he knew more than he ever said. Sometimes, when the wind hit just right, Grace swore she could still hear footsteps from across the street, pacing, deliberate, heavy. But there was no one there. 3 months later, Mara received an envelope in the mail. No return address, no postmark. Inside was a single sheet of paper torn from an old leather-bound journal. Elena Ward's handwriting, slanted, familiar. April 19th. If they ever find me, tell them it wasn't just him. There's another secret buried here. Mara froze, her heart stuttering. She read it again and again, the words sinking in like ice. It wasn't just him. The letter had been mailed from Crestwood. That much she confirmed. But who sent it? Aaron was gone. Vanished shortly after Daniel's arrest. Grace hadn't spoken publicly since the trial. And Elena. Elena was gone, yet somehow still speaking. Mara placed the letter beside her desk lamp, the glow highlighting the indentation of other words faintly visible on the next page. She rubbed a pencil over it carefully, revealing a ghostly line beneath. The stairs aren't the only place he touched. Her pulse raced. The phrasing, not he did, but he touched. Was Elena referring to Daniel? Or someone else entirely? The next day, Mara drove to the storage facility where the remaining evidence was kept. The Ward case files stacked neatly in brown boxes. She sifted through photos, blood analysis reports, and property receipts until she reached the final box labeled Recovered Journal, Elena Ward. But inside there were only photocopies. The original journal was gone. Her breath caught. She checked the sign-out logs. The last person to handle it was listed simply as A. Ward. Aaron. She sank into the nearest chair, heart pounding. He was here, she whispered. He came back. That night, Mara returned once more to 112 Maple Drive. The new owners had already moved in, their lights glowing warmly through the windows. A child's laughter echoed faintly, spilling out into the night. Mara stood on the sidewalk, rain beginning to fall again. The streetlights flickered, reflecting off the wet pavement like broken glass. From across the street, Grace stepped out of her porch shadow, meeting Mara's gaze. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Grace's voice carried softly through the rain. "You think it's over, don't you?" Mara shook her head slowly. "No, I think it's just quiet." Grace looked back toward the house. "Sometimes I swear I still hear her crying." Mara followed her gaze, the glow of the living room window painting soft rectangles of light across the dark yard. A faint, almost imperceptible sound drifted through the air, a creak, like a footstep on old wood. Then silence. As Mara turned to leave, a motion in the window caught her eye. The staircase. For a moment she thought she saw a shadow move there, slow, deliberate, almost human. But when she blinked, it was gone. She exhaled shakily, rain sliding down her face. In her mind, Elena's final words echoed one last time. "There's another secret buried here." The camera of her memory panned upward, to the attic window, the one no one had ever searched. Lightning flashed, and for an instant, behind the glass, a faint silhouette watched her go.